This is really important because I learned about this term at Fuller Seminary when we're learning about Luther's theology of the cross. But it gives a name to it, and that's the Latin word Sub Contrario. Marvelous, because he brought it in and he contrasted it to what was in that time in medieval Roman Catholicism, the theology of glory. It was something that glorified riches and wealth and power. God was a distant being that you didn't have contact with, and all you had as your earthly reference was this very powerful structure where everything was so glorified and it looked exactly worldly. People didn't know to read at the time. There was no Bible that they could access. So people were really lost on how to connect with God. There was no relationship like you have today. Then on the contrary, you have this it disoriented people. It's like it was hard to believe. It required faith. This naked God, actually shameful, like nothing much to look at, hanging on this cross. And this is supposed to be our salvation? This? And I want you to imagine that when you go out into the world, everything that you see sometimes is so beautiful. And I'm not saying it's wicked. I'm just trying to realign your value system. I'm trying to realign what you aspire to, what you intend for, what is important to you, what defines you, what encourages you, what discourages you. This is the perfect example because Adam and Eve are there in the garden, they're looking at this tree, and when they're looking at it, it's so pleasing to the eye. It was like they just wanted to reach out and touch it because it was supposed to make them wise. It's like the intellect that you can gain, the technology that you can gain. And it was really, really beyond their self-control. They reached out and they took it. On the flip side of that, let's look at Isaiah 53.
For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground.
And this is a picture of what we're looking at when we see the cross, right?
He has no form or comeliness. And when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him.
The figure of shame. Honestly, it's like nothing much, and it just contradicts everything you hold and value and aspire to in your lives today. But in this, the message of the cross, in this is the power of God. In this, it's foolishness for those who are perishing. Imagine the Roman Empire, like the height of the Roman Empire conquering half the world, and they were like, we are gods ourselves, the Caesars are gods. Imagine the Greek gods, it was all about power and dominion, and humanity was emulating that. And this, a suffering God. And sometimes we fear weakness. We really fear weakness because of what we're trained to in the world. And I'm not asking you to be a church of weak people in a sense of, give in to anything, be pushovers. That's not the weakness we're talking about. We're talking about identifying in each other's suffering, identifying in the suffering of Christ. And people are scared of that because it looks hopeless and it draws you in and you're like, oh, no, what's the point of suffering? We all have suffered. We all have lost. We all have felt moments of no hope. And how do I gain hope looking at this, knowing that Christ suffered with me, as me, for me? How does it help me? And then you push through beyond that because you understand that this was the biggest plan that God had for us. It confounded the wise. It just confounded the minds of those who thought they knew better. And in it was the plan and the power for you and me. And if we identify in this suffering, if we look at that and know God is with us, He's truly with us. He was with you in your deepest, darkest moment, in the dark night of your soul. He's there for you today. He was there for you yesterday. He'll be there for you always, but not as a distant God. Christ on the cross proves that God is not a distant, almighty, powerful, impassible God. He's also a God who relates with you. He's also a God who resides in you and who lives with you. And if we can understand that, then we can push through into the power of the resurrection. Philippians talks about that. He says, identify in his suffering so that we can now identify in the resurrection. Because we all suffer. It's human nature to suffer. But resurrection, it's power. It shows something beyond human limitation. It shows something beyond death. Are you telling me that we can conquer death? What does it look like in our day-to-day lives to be able to walk in that resurrection power? And so Sub Contrario is beautiful because it reminds us to shift gears. It disorients us a little bit, and then it helps us to really evaluate what we look up to. What are we allowing into our lives? What do we allow into our culture? What do we allow into our community that is taking away our peace, taking away the love we have, how we relate to each other? Do you know that if we were driven by mammon and the way of the world, we would treat each other very badly? We might treat you nicely to your face, but inside we're like plotting. Because it's like you need to push through. Somebody's got to make it. It's like there's only a limited pieces in the pie. We have to grab. It's eat or be eaten. It's a performance-driven world out there. And here, we're telling you, make your material wealth and everything bow down. What does that look like? And we're saying, then you'll be rich. Then you'll be rich. And then you'll honor the one who gives you the power. Who? The suffering God on the cross gives me the power? That gives me the power? That is the symbol of my power? Poverty, death, sickness, all that just hanging there? Yes, because through that is your victory. And in your weakness, his strength is made perfect. This is the paradox. This is the paradox we live in, and this is the community that we want to emulate here. A lot of people run away from suffering, but if we can really draw on it and understand that God is amongst his people, he's with his people, not for the sake of suffering as an end, but for the sake of resurrection as an end.